Hello and welcome to Different Leaf, a show for new and experienced cannabis consumers. I'm Brit Smith. You know the fashion designer Tommy Hilfiger? Well, pretty soon you'll be able to wear some of those classic Hilfiger-esque tennis polo shirts, but they can have a cute little cannabis-looking leaf on the lapel, and you'll be enjoying some matching branded California-grown cannabis. Yep, Tommy Hilfiger is getting into weed. In the new fall issue of Different Leaf the magazine, you can get an exclusive first look at the new crossover line from California-based cannabis company Green Horizons and Tommy Hilfiger's classic tennis-inspired apparel line, BOAST. Starting on page 53, you can see some of the new hats, jerseys, shorts, pre-rolls, and vapes that will make up their new line of cannabis and clothing. So what got Tommy Hilfiger interested in founding a cannabis company and revitalizing an old clothing line that he bought years ago by pairing it with some really well-grown weed? This episode, we're going to chat with the CEO of Green Horizons, Los Arias, about how it all came together with his brand and the Hilfigers. We'll chat about their meeting, their motivations, their vision, we'll get the tea on some early product drops, and much more. You can see the BOAST and Green Horizons products in the new issue of Different Leaf, or you can get a little sneak peek by following us on social media at Different Leaf, and I'm at Brit the British. And we'll be right back to chat with Los Arias of Green Horizons. If, like me, you weren't around in the 70s, here's a breakdown of BOAST, how it came to be part of Tommy Hilfiger's portfolio, and what it's all got to do with cannabis culture. BOAST was this classic all-American Ivy League sports fashion brand that was launched by a tennis player in Connecticut in 1973, more than a decade before Tommy Hilfiger was even a name. BOAST came on the heels of Ralph Lauren, which was started in the late 60s, and Lacoste, which was founded by a French tennis player in the mid-30s. So BOAST was part of this sports fashion world of polo shirts, tennis shorts, and headbands. But unlike its counterpart brands, BOAST quickly became a hit with 70s rebels on and off the tennis courts, because its logo looked weirdly identical to our favorite Different Leaf, cannabis. The original maker of BOAST, Bill St. John, said the logo is actually a Japanese maple leaf, but at the time, rebellious athletes loved it as a sly nod to the countercultures of both cannabis and the bad boy tennis culture of the 70s, fueled by players like Ilya Nastase, John McEnroe, and Jimmy Connors. Tom Cruise even donned some BOAST clothing in the 1983 movie Risky Business, and a young George W. Bush was seen sporting it back in the day too. It was being sold in department stores like Macy's and Nordstrom, where it had really become this clean-cut yet bad boy vintage sports label, until it stopped being produced in the early 90s. All-American fashion icon Tommy Hilfiger bought the BOAST brand back in 2017, with plans to eventually revive it in the US, and it seems he's waited until now to bring it back, because we're currently awaiting the drop of BOAST's new line, which will include shirts, shorts, jerseys, and hats, all with its leaf logo. And it'll be complemented by a BOAST brand of infused pre-rolls, vapes, and gummies made with Green Horizons flower. Green Horizons is a sustainability-focused cannabis company based in Coachella, California. It was founded by our guest today, Los Arias, and his business partner Michael Mead, two cancer survivors who found cannabis on their healing journeys. You can read more about them in the new issue of Different Leaf the magazine, available at differentleaf.com. A few years after they founded Green Horizons, Los Arias was introduced to Tommy Hilfiger's daughter, Allie, who was going through her own healing journey from Lyme disease. And that's where we start our story of how Tommy Hilfiger and Los Arias first got together to mesh the worlds of apparel and cannabis culture. Meet Los Arias, CEO of Green Horizons.
Thank you so much, Britt. It's great to be on the show, and I'm thrilled to talk about this. And originally from Miami, Florida, Cuban, Brazilian descent. On my mom's side, which is the Brazilian side, there's a long lineage of working with ancestral plant medicines, including cannabis, other plants like ayahuasca, and even venturing into some amphibian modalities like combo and 5-MeO-DMT. So that's sort of been my path from a very early age, just a real appreciation for plant medicine, ancestral medicine, and bringing that to the fore as an entrepreneur in cannabis. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. I got my start in Colorado originally. I was one of the founders of a company called River Rock, which was a first mover in that state. In 2017, I was a first mover in California. During that time, I went to evening and weekend law school, graduated, earned my Juris Doctor degree, and was lucky enough to come into communion with my co-founder, Michael Mead, on Green Horizons, which is a large-scale project in Coachella, California, and Tommy Hilfiger and his team.
An amazing growth from somebody who was brought up with plant medicine to now being somebody who is, not just selling and growing and creating cannabis products, but is also bonding with a massive brand like the Hilfiger name to make that crossover and to, introduce cannabis to maybe a wider marketplace. Let's talk about that foundation of Green Horizons with you and your partner, Michael Mead. You guys have this similar story that you both found cannabis through cancer diagnoses. So this is really a plant and a passion that you guys have for health and wellness. And now you're sort of moving into that, I don't know, I guess it's like a cultural fashion crossover. What that took to get from the beginning of, founding cannabis company to connecting with Tommy Hilfiger. What is that story?
Sure. Thank you, Receive. Well, it is a pretty good one. And, to your point, Brit, Michael and I did come into communion with each other during our respective journeys with being diagnosed with cancer. Both cannabis and some of the other ancestral modalities that I mentioned played a material role in both Michael and I healing. And during that time, we were really just friends, and we were in each other's lives in that capacity. And, that's a powerful experience to have that kind of healing and to share that with somebody. And we both made a commitment to each other. Hey, God wants us to be here. This was our experience of it. And let's do something big together, man. Let's align and, really work towards increasing the awareness around plant medicine and, reaching more people. And this was a foundational ethos. The Hilfiger nexus was much the same. So I actually met Allie Hilfiger first, Tommy's daughter, who is fantabulous. And as you may or may not know, she has struggled quite a bit with Lyme disease. Mm-hmm. She wrote a big book about it called Bite Me, which was a New York Times bestseller. And it really chronicles her journey with Lyme. And notwithstanding her resources, she really struggled to find anything that materially helped her, Brit. And, when I came into communion with her through one of our co-founders at Green Horizons, one of my best friends, Phil Holting, he had been friends with Allie and the family for a long time. She wasn't doing so hot. I met her at a time when she was physically weak and she was frustrated. And I was almost sort of the last resort. And I introduced her to this world of ancestral modalities. She had already been in communion with cannabis, which had helped her, but she needed a little bit more. And in her case, combo, Kambo, is a venom secretion from the Amazonian monkey frog that is applied over the skin. And it is an incredible aid for one's immune system. It's actually not a controlled substance in this country. So there's actually quite a bit of literature and research on this venom. And of course, venoms are the basis of many medicines, even in the pharmaceutical landscape. So this really, really, really turned her life around. And we went alternative, Brit, and she just started doing better and better and better and better. And it got to a point, we became very good friends during that process, and her husband, Steve Hash. And, she called me up one day and she was like, hey, man, my dad would like to say thank you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm flattered. How's that going to work? And she's like, well, I gave him your phone number. Here it is. Mark it down. He's going to call you. And, I took that in stride and said, okay, and I did input the number into my phone. And really, truth be told, didn't really think about it again until sure enough, a couple weeks later or so, I'm in a meeting or what have you, my phone's ringing, I take a look and there it is, Tommy Hilfiger's calling you. So,
Oh my gosh.
I politely excused myself from the setting and said, I need to take this one. And he couldn't have been nicer. He was just like, hey, man, is this Los? And I'm like, yeah. Hi, Mr. Hilfiger. And he was just like, well, look, I don't know what you did to my daughter, but I've never seen her like this in terms of her health and her vitality. And I want to say thank you. And I'd love to shake your hand. And I understand you're in LA. I go out there often. I'd love to, sync that up at some point. And, you got it, sir. Right? Okay. So yeah, lovely, lovely intro there. And that's where we left it, Britt. And I didn't hear from him again for probably the better part of a year. I was in touch with Allie and Steve regularly. And Allie gives me a call another day down the road and says, hey, my dad's coming to town. I said, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, you need to meet with him. So we met up in the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. I'll never forget it. And there was like a 30-minute slot. You got to be there at 4 p.m. And
yeah. You got to be on time for someone like Tommy Hilfiger.
Listen,
right?
I was there at 3 p.m. I waited 60 minutes in the hallway, right? I was excited. I said hello. He couldn't have been nicer. And before you knew it, we were there, 3-4 hours later. And he was just like, he had never been introduced to these worlds of these different medicines. So he was like, combo what? Ayahuasca what? And, I just started talking, Britt, and sharing not only my journey, but what we did with, and he was just fascinated. And we began a friendship. And nary a word was spoken about business. This was just, two people rapping out about plant medicine and the power of it. And we shook hands and said, let's keep in touch. And then he reached out to me thereafter, and he had gotten an unsolicited offer from a Canadian pub co. I won't say the name out of respect, and he asked me to review the offer and tell him what I think, which I was very flattered by. And, he was aware that I was in the cannabis industry, but really not much more than that. And I said, hey, I'd be happy to. And I read what was on the page. It was a pretty compelling proposal, but there were some specific things that I didn't love about it for him. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take like extra care here and not only just like call him back and say, here's what I think, but I'm going to prepare like a full-on brief. And, I had the law school education in me, you can't get rid of it. And I said, I'm going to really take my time with this and do it well. They responded some days later and said, hey, this is really helpful. Can you get on a call? And we got on the call, and part of that analysis that I had provided was a real overview of the cannabis industry and some of the things that I thought that were very important, like controlling your supply chain. And that's what led to the conversation about Green Horizons. And they started asking a lot of questions about what we were doing. And I said, well, it's a 1 million square foot campus. We led with infrastructure. We want to build a house of brands. We know how to build buildings and grow premium cannabis. We're actually looking for a branding expert. Wink, wink.
Yeah, right.
Right. Just kind of lightly sprinkling that magic. And I had very little background on Tommy's journey in fashion and the inflection, but beyond the fact that I wore a lot of his clothes as a youngster. And what I learned was that there came a point that supply chain, Tommy had an alliance come together years ago where him and his company all of a sudden controlled the supply chain. And that was a material differentiator in their ability to scale, to deliver products consistently, and to really take market share. And that is quite literally what Green Horizons is. Thesis is, that's what's really going to set you apart in this very fragmented landscape that has been cannabis to date.
So you saw a company that could help you reach that goal of scaling like that, like creating that house of brands. It was not just the Hilfiger name and how much he obviously cared about the mission of cannabis, but also that company experience in building brands.
And I would say this is a true statement probably across the board. There's companies that are really good at building brands and being asset light, which is, creating attractive IP, getting people excited about it, but running into issues when they don't have any infrastructure. And when you reach a certain level of scale, the brand starts to suffer for lack